Today on CSB UnPasteurized.
Let's talk about yeast.
Let's. So what about it?
They're these things that we need in order to brew.
Wait, people like the cork pop sound.
Cork
I'm
pop.
opening a bottle of Ardbeg Wee Beastie. Listen to this. It's just so satisfying. I don't know why that is. And I know it's probably sacrilege for me to be drinking whiskey on a brewing show, but yeah.
That's
it's
okay.
been one of those days.
I'm making up for it because I am drinking one of my favorites, the dark chocolate pomegranate that's been aged for 1 year. This is delicious.
The tasting just came out.
Right. If you haven't seen the tasting, go watch the tasting. And then when you're done watching the tasting, go watch the making and then get in your kitchen and make some. Or
what if they don't do it in the kitchen?
Well, I was going to say.
It could be their basement. It could be the
wherever
workroom.
you brew.
They might even own a full-on brewery.
Then I'm jealous.
Yeah, me too. But anyway, today we're talking about yeast, and we're talking about things that come up a lot. Common questions, common concepts, and misconceptions that people have.
That's right. So we're going to just start off the generalizations of yeast, what their characteristics are.
For one, they have an alcohol tolerance. Now, I don't know why, but I think Mangrove Jack is the only company that actually puts their alcohol tolerance right on the yeast packet.
Thank you, Mangrove Jack. That's important information that us as homebrewers need.
It is. It's like a super important thing, and it's one of the biggest factors. So I don't understand why they don't just put it right on there.
I'm sorry. I have a cat that's about to go into turbo.
Well, maybe you should get Inigo out of there. Pardon for cat adjustment.
One day, I swear, he's just going to end up in there, and that's not good because there's sanitization liquid in there.
Yeah, we don't want him to take a bath in that.
Okay, I think he's found something else to be interested in.
And we try not to do these with cuts. So
right, so we're
rolling. We're just
rolling.
going to run with it.
All
Anyway,
right, so what is alcohol tolerance, Brian?
It is a general rule or guideline, kind of like the Pirates Code, of what the tolerance that yeast has for alcohol. In other words, alcohol and CO2 are the yeast's excrement. They're their waste products. So at a certain point, they cannot tolerate being in so much of their own waste, and they not necessarily die. Sometimes they die. Sometimes they just go dormant until conditions change. So say it has a 15% alcohol tolerance. You can be reasonably sure that somewhere between 13.5% and 16.5%, the yeast is probably not going to function anymore.
But beyond that, it's not going to just magically go to that number and stop. No,
Right.
It needs some things. And one of those things it needs is fermentable sugars. Because if you put a teaspoon of fermentable sugar in, so let's say, an 18% alcohol tolerance yeast, you're not magically going to create 18% alcohol just because that yeast goes to 18%.
Yes, that actually happens quite often. We get people that say, well, I used an 18% yeast, so I made 18% of alcohol. Well, that's not really how it works. You might have, but you might not have, depending on how much sugars you added. But that's the basics of alcohol tolerance. Now, I always say yeast cannot read, and that's why I said there's a range. Even if it's 15, it really isn't 15. It could be 14. It could even be 13. It could be 16. It could even be 17. And the factors involved in that are temperature, the nutrition of the must itself, aeration of the must. There's a lot of factors. Let's just leave it at that. There's a lot of reasons. So under perfect conditions, they should get to their tolerance. But under imperfect conditions, not as high. And under really good conditions, they can even go higher.
And that's why Brian kind of off the cuff made the joke about the Pirates Code, and it's really actually very applicable to this. This is what the manufacturer has found out in research and in creating this particular yeast, that this is basically the limit in normal nominal conditions, if we want to go.
The expectation.
Right. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's what's going to happen. So
Now,
moving on.
some other characteristics that are, sometimes you have to Google foo for this stuff.
Yes.
Sometimes it's right on the package, but we just, most people have a cell phone handy or the internet handy enough that it's not that big of a deal. pH, or the acidity that they like to work in. Different yeasts like different pHs, and there's quite a bit of a range. It's actually kind of surprising.
And if you think about it, yeasts are living organisms. And so if you are an aquarium hobbyist or a gardener, you know that the fish in the aquarium and the plants in the garden also have various pH levels that make them happy. And so you want to find out that information on your yeast, your living organism, and make sure that it is happy, so that way you have a happy fermentation.
And another characteristic, this isn't all of them, by the way, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just some of the major things that we look for, is temperature. Now, each yeast has its own temperature range that they like. Usually it's pretty large, like 55 degrees Fahrenheit to 90 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, that's a wide range. Now, here's the thing. At the lower end, you're at risk of it stalling and going dormant for overstressing. And at the higher end, you're at risk of off flavors and weird smells and things like that. So you want to be careful with the extremes of that. But there's more to it than even that, because there's something to be said for, kind of like in bread making, the longer the rise, the longer the fermenting process, that's why you put like a sourdough in the fridge, the more flavors you get as a result of those yeasts fermenting. So it's always a game of how fast do you want it to ferment, because a really slow ferment, you may lose some of your aromatics out through the airlock. But a really fast ferment, sometimes they go out too. It's all time versus exposure, and there's so many factors. But a very fast ferment can sometimes be more preferred. Most people want it to just get over quickly so they can get to the aging, so they can get to flavoring, whatever. Whereas a slower ferment can sometimes make a more complex, deeper, richer flavor. We live in Florida. We keep our air conditioning going pretty much 11 months and 28 days out of the year. Our house stays at about 75 to 78 degrees Fahrenheit. I do not want to make it much colder because, well, we'll freeze because we're used to it being 90 degrees outside.
And it'll cost us a lot of money.
Oh, yeah. It's expensive enough as it is.
Yeah.
I don't really want our air conditioning bill to be that much higher. So that's why we don't do that. And we have so many fermenters going at once that to keep them all cold, it just doesn't make sense. We could get some sort of a refrigeration unit or something, but no, we like to just keep things simple. Okay. So that's the gist of temperature. It really comes down to your environment and what the yeast are like.
But beyond the yeast, if you think about it, there are particular brew styles that are designed to be fermented in different temperature ranges. And that plays along with what the yeast is going to give to the brew. So like, I believe lagers tend to be brewed at colder temperatures. So that way they can enhance that flavor profile that the yeast is going to add to the brew.
They're a different kind of yeast though. They're like most yeast, I forget if it's top or bottom. Lager are the opposite.
Right. Right.
So they go to, I think lager are bottom, whereas the other ones are top. I think.
We've also been doing more research on different wine styles now that we're being able to get our
like
hands.
Riesling, for one.
And Riesling wants to be fermented at a lower temperature as well.
We have the juice. We just haven't started yet because we don't have a way to keep it cold.
Yeah, we're working on it. Give us some time. We'll figure it out.
Probably.
But that goes beyond yeast, but that just gives you an idea of why those things are done that way and what adds to the flavor profile. So then the last thing, we're just going to kind of generalize on yeast, and that's, I labeled it as extras, but basically this is the flavors that the yeasts add to a brew, and those are termed as
esters. A lot of time, that's the major name that most people give them. And what that means is the yeast doesn't actually have banana in it, but it might add a banana flavor. It doesn't actually have floral anything in it, but it might add a floral note. Some of them are really good at keeping colors, like certain reds and that kind of thing. Others are really good at working through lower nutrient musts. Others have, there's a lot of different factors that they all have. They all fall under extras. Now, here's the thing. Every yeast that we would use for brewing is Saccharomyces cerevisiae. They're all the exact same species of yeast. That's important to know.
I think there's one new one that's a derivative.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't think we've used it yet.
I don't think we've used it yet, but I know it's come up.
Well, there's a few other yeasts out there, but the ones that we've used.
But the majority of them are.
And they're just different strains. Think of it kind of like dogs, but it's not even that specialized. Dogs have different breeds, or cats have different breeds, but they're all the same species. So you have that kind of variance, in which case Certain yeasts will work better in higher temperatures. Certain ones will work better in lower temperatures. Some in higher temperatures will give this specific ester. Some in this lower temperature may give that specific ester. And that is kind of the lifelong charge of the homebrewer, to find the yeast that works perfectly in their environment for what they want and in every situation. It's hard to have a multi-purpose yeast that just works all around and gives us very specialized feel. Okay.
And this is when Google Foo is really going to aid you in selecting a yeast. If you have the availability in your area to get a wide range of yeast and you have an idea of what kind of brew you want to make, I strongly suggest. Did you do the pop again?
I did.
I could have paused for the pop because
no, it's okay.
We all love the pop.
It's okay.
But let's say you're going to make a specific wine type. Well, you can go into Google and you can type in what yeast is best for this particular wine type. And lots of people are going to give you your opinions. I just bumped this with my chin. I'm sorry if that made a horrible noise. Lots of people are going to give you your opinions. You want to scroll past the opinions.
You want the manufacturer's
trust me
ideas.
On this. You're going to want to get to it.
You know what they say? Opinions are like a certain body part.
Yeah,
Everybody's got one.
Everybody's got one.
You don't need to show me yours.
Yeah, we don't need that. So try to find a verified source. Find something that has some science to back up and to tell you why. Not just use this, but use this because these things.
Sites that you trust, YouTubers that you trust,
right.
Creators that you trust.
Right.
There's a lot of really good information out there. There's a lot of people working with yeast. We don't tend to get as specialized into yeast as we might be able to, mostly because we hear from people all the time that they can't even get some of the general yeast that we use. So we don't like to get too into it, because if 90% of our audience can't get the thing that we're recommending to use in this recipe, it's going to come out different. So I don't want to use that. I'd rather use something that everybody can get pretty easily.
Sure. And so then that relates back to our original listing of the yeast characteristics. So if you can't get a particular yeast that we're using or that somebody that you're looking at is using, you want to look at those characteristics and try to find a yeast that matches those characteristics as much as possible that you can get.
Exactly.
Particularly the alcohol tolerance. I would say that would be...
That's the first thing I look at.
The second would be temperature, but you don't have to match their temperature. You want to match what your brewing temperature is, because that's more important for you.
There's things like Kvike yeast now is the new all the rage. We have yet to try it because, in my opinion, it's still a little bit too expensive for the average person to be buying a lot of yeast. So we haven't really done it yet. And that's the real reason why we haven't done it. Also, because I have a tendency that if everybody's doing something, I will wait till no one is doing it anymore and then do it. Butterfly pea, as an example, we waited until it was no longer popular, and that's when we made something with butterfly pea. It's just the way I am.
We also have very different styles of coming up with recipes. When Brian comes up with a recipe, he's thinking in his head, and like all the numbers are showing up in colors, and some weird magic stuff's going on that I just can't comprehend.
Yes, I see numbers as colors and shapes.
It's
true.
There's a word. What's the word?
Autophagia, I think.
I don't know. I thought there was another word, but words.
Somebody will tell us.
Anywho, so he's like, okay, I want this. This is my end result. The yeast that I know, that I'm familiar with, that's going to create that is this. That's what I'm using. Where I am like the research psycho person. I am like, oh, I have this idea. I want to use this ingredient. Oh, what other ingredients go with this ingredients? Type, search. Okay, so now I have this ingredient and this ingredient. Oh, now I want a spice to go with those ingredients. What goes with those? Search. Type. And then I'm like, okay, great. Now what yeast do I use? More searching, more typing, and that's how I come with recipes.
And I would like to point out why there is a preponderance of my recipes on the channel versus hers. Because mine can be made in a day. Hers,
mine are slightly
some of them she's still working on from before when the channel even existed. But anyway. Sorry to interrupt the video, but I wanted to tell you about the City Steading VIP Club. It's a super friendly bunch of brewers who get together and constantly help each other and share information. A large part of it is our private Facebook group where you can ask questions and get help. We also have Zoom meetings monthly for most tiers of membership. These hangouts are a great way to ask questions or just hang out with us and the other members. In addition, the higher tiers get their names right in our videos. So consider becoming a VIP. Now, back to the video. I might have exaggerated a little bit.
Somebody's throwing shade. Anywho.
It wasn't shade. That was like holding an umbrella over you. I was protecting you. So that's the basic characteristics of yeast. Okay. And that's not all we wanted to talk about. There's some other misconceptions and ideas that people have had that we wanted to discuss. But first, I need to open this bottle again.
Oh, that was a good one.
That was a good one.
You should pour it in front of the mic too. You can't do that. It's too complicated. It's okay.
It won't make any noise. I pour very carefully.
I know. He's gentle. It's Ardbeg. Okay. If you like Scotch, particularly if you like Islay Scotch, I'm going to say, and this is blasphemy, and I'm so sorry, don't get Laphroaig.
Oh, come on. I like Laphroaig too. I prefer Ardbeg, but Ardbeg. I like Laphroaig.
Get any version of Ardbeg.
Cal-Ela 12 is also
Cal-Ela. Hey. Okay. High five, Adam.
How much have you had to drink?
Not that much. I'm just trying to bump up Ardbeg. I love Ardbeg, and I can't drink it anymore.
Ardbeg Wee Beastie is one of my favorites. I just got it the other day. It's actually really nice. I like the younger stuff that's a little more aggressive, you know? But anyway, back to yeast and homebrewing.
All right, so this is a misconception. This is a huge misconception that we get in the comments all the time. And it kind of just makes us go,
where are they getting it from?
Huh? And I think the basis of this is the lack of understanding of the basic principles of fermentation process. And I kind of touched on it already, but we're going to go into depth now. And this misconception is more yeast equals more alcohol.
Yeah, you'd be surprised how many people say, okay, so I'm at 14% right now. If I add more yeast, can I get it to 18%?
No.
Well, maybe, but not because of the yeast. You have to have the right yeast and you have to have something for it to ferment. The yeast alone won't make 18% alcohol.
We've had some people argue belligerent about it.
I have been called some nasty names.
I used an 18% yeast, therefore my alcohol is 18%, and I used 2 tablespoons of fermentable sugar.
Well, they used more than 2 tablespoons.
I'm exaggerating for effect.
Yep. We've had people that will literally argue that it doesn't matter how much fermentables you have. If you use an 18% yeast, you're making 18% alcohol or more. I've had people that say, well, an 18% yeast makes 22%.
And I hate to get angry about it, but it hurts my logical brain. I have a very strong logical brain that I got from my father's side, and it's like near Vulcan style logic. So I need the ears and the eyebrows and stuff, and
I do the eyebrow.
That's illogical.
That was good.
Thank you. I love Spock. Where's Spock? Come here, Spock.
You know, this is kind of designed to be audio.
Okay.
They don't know that he's there.
For those of you who are listening, Spock is right here next to me. I am loving him.
Oh, boy.
All right. We'll just sit
We've gone off the rails.
We've gone off the rails. But my point being is that you can't get something from nothing. It doesn't matter if there's a number written on your cute little packet. If they don't have the food in order to consume to create that alcohol, it's just not going to magically appear.
It's an A plus B equals C equation. It's not an A equals C equation.
Right. There's more to the equation, as Brian just literally said. And I can appreciate that people get angry because they're like, no,
they don't understand.
That's what this is telling me.
Yep.
But the fault isn't that that's what it's telling you. The fault is that you're not understanding what the full scope of the process is.
Right.
And I have no problem with people not understanding. That's
that's
point of
what our channel's about.
Is to teach and educate and to help you understand better. But it's when they argue about it.
I don't mean just like, I misunderstood. I mean like
super angry.
Some of these comments get held by the profanity filter in YouTube because of what they say.
Calling us names because we understand the procedure and you don't is not very helpful. And I'm not saying you specifically,
not you.
Because you specifically.
It's the you others that are probably not even watching this video.
Right, which is a shame because then they would learn something.
That's the irony of YouTube. The people who really need to know the information probably aren't watching the information that they actually need to know when it's put out. That was very profound of me.
I like Spock's in here. I think
now I need a mascot.
Who would your mascot be?
I have no idea. I'll come up with something for next time. Oh, yeah. I'll have something.
Stay tuned for next
So
Unpasteurized.
that's something that comes up a lot, and we can go on and on and on. But the gist is, just because you added more yeast doesn't mean you're going to get more alcohol. Now, in that, let me just explain. There is an extreme example where it does mean more alcohol, and that's when, let's say, you didn't put in enough yeast to build a viable colony. Now it's stressing, it's going to stall, it's not going to ferment even the sugar that's available to it. In that case, more yeast could get it to do what it was destined to do in the first place, but not create more than what it was meant to do.
Another example would be perhaps you got a bad batch and the yeast packet is dead.
Right.
Yeah, you're going to need to add a new packet of yeast in order to ferment.
They're actually the same problem.
Right.
Because with a dead colony of yeast, you don't have enough viable cells to create a colony, therefore it's not going to ferment. So realistically, those two situations are the same problem, but just slightly different approaches to the same problem.
Exactly.
The next thing that we want to talk about is something that I actually did a video on this already.
Yeah.
But I want to touch on it again.
It keeps coming up.
Yeah, it still comes up. You can use wine yeast to make wine, mead, cider, and beer. You can use mead yeast to make wine, mead, cider, and beer. You can use ale yeast to make wine, mead, cider, and beer. Doesn't matter. Just because you used a wine yeast doesn't make it a wine. Just because you use a mead yeast doesn't make it a mead. The ingredients make it what it is. The yeast creates alcohol. The yeast have no idea what they're making, and they don't care either. Sugar is sugar is sugar as far as yeast are concerned.
Are you sitting down? You can use bread yeast to make wine, cider, beer, or mead.
I just don't want to have the comments, because this is what happened when I did this video. Everybody's like, oh, so I've been making bread all this time? I'm like,
no,
I think you missed the point. And I know some of them are just trying to be smartasses, and that's okay. I can appreciate that. I'm quite a bit of a smartass myself. But after a while, they get old.
It does.
That's all I'm saying.
That's okay. But basically what we're saying is that it's not the yeast's marketing tag that is creating the brew. It is the ingredients that you're putting in the brew that creates the brew.
Exactly. You can use the same yeast and make a mead, wine, cider, and a beer, all with different ingredients and the same yeast, and have completely different results. Anyway, that's enough on that. And please, let's not flood the comment section with a bunch of people making smartass comments about making bread with... Please. I have to answer all the comments. Please don't do this to me. And I have a new rule. I answer all the comments, whether it's a heart, whether it's a like, whether it's a comment. I respond to everything.
There's a thing he didn't say.
Everything.
So watch yourself. All right. The next one is highly controversial. And why is it highly controversial, Brian? You probably don't even know why it's highly controversial. Would you like me to tell you why it's highly controversial?
Yes.
Because Lalman themselves posted...
Lallemande?
Lallemande.
Yeah, that name is just hard to say.
Posted an article of themselves. And because I am subscribed to their newsletter... Oh, it's another good one.
Sorry.
I just...
Going in for the refills.
That's like the...
For those of you who aren't seeing the video, I'm pouring like maybe half an ounce to an ounce at a time.
Little bit.
I mean, as much as I don't mind being slightly intoxicated on camera, drunk, not a good sign.
No, and he doesn't even really like that sensation because
I really don't like being
he
drunk.
likes to be fully cognitive and fully in control all the time.
In control. Although I do like a little haze, just a touch.
Just a little fuzzy, a little soft.
Yeah.
All right, so back to what I was saying. Being a subscriber to the newsletter, and if you are interested in the Lallemande products, I highly suggest that you subscribe to their newsletter. You get information sent to your email, so that way you are up to date on what they're talking about. And
Even I don't do this.
Lots of
She
interesting
does
things.
Why don't I do it? Because I won't read it anyway.
Because I'm a bigger nerd than he is.
Like that's a surprise.
Yeah. So they posted an article where they did extensive research on what we're talking about right now, which is hydration, prehydration, rehydration, whatever term you want to use, of yeast important?
Let me explain what we are talking about when we say hydration of yeast. In ye olden times, in the early days of City Steading brews, we used to actually have a cup that I put water in and the yeast in, and we let it froth up. We let it sit for a while. Does anybody else need to pee?
Sounds like I'm
Just
peeing.
saying. Yeah.
Bad, I'm sorry.
She was
I
pouring
apologize.
more of the
I
wine.
apologize. My bad.
That's pretty funny.
I was trying to do the
Rails? What rails? We're
We're off those
outside
rails.
the box? What box? Anyway, so that's what hydration is when you basically pre-start the yeast. Now, the theory here is that it makes sure that you know it's alive. I think in ye olden times, like 100, 200 years ago, it was probably important to know. Today, we're expecting that yeast to work. So it's going to be a pretty extreme example if it doesn't. So I don't see it as a problem to not hydrate. Now, here's my theory on why I don't think hydration is necessary. If you hydrate your yeast in water, you are creating an environment that those yeast are now acclimating to. Then you're going to pour that yeast water into a must filled with sugar, fruits, spices, you name it. And the yeast are going to go, whoa, what the heck did you just do to me? You may shock them. That's my theory. I may be a little bit wrong, but I believe that is a thing. Whereas just putting them in dry, now they will hydrate slowly in that liquid that they're going to be living their entire existence in. Just so you know, that the colony that you pour in is like 1,000,000th. Like they multiply thousands and thousands and thousands of times over. So that little tiny bit that you put in is nothing compared to the colony of yeast that exists within your must in just a few days. The yeast that you put in are gone by the time you get to racking. It's their like great grandchildren by that point. So don't think for a second that the amount that you put in, that's something else later, though. No, we talked about this already. More yeast does not mean more anything.
Yeah.
This gets into something
It's
else, though. How much yeast to add.
All
We
right.
didn't talk about that.
All right. But before we get there, let's finish on what we're talking about right now.
Which is what?
What I was talking about, and then I started pouring more beverage because it's yummy.
Now everybody had to go take a pee break.
I'm so sorry. Hopefully you're back. You're relaxed. You're comfortable.
Pause button.
You poured yourself something yummy to drink as well. Cheers, by the way.
Wait, clink.
I did that.
We should have done that a long time ago.
on purpose because I was trying to get the audio, but I don't know.
I'm sure it got it.
Okay.
I'll fix it. Don't worry.
So again, the controversy, quote unquote, of this is that particular article where they did this extensive research of determining of whether prehydrating the yeast and doing the step feed, because there's like some packets will tell you, okay, use this amount of water to rehydrate and then add this
At this
nutrient and
temperature
then this and blah,
oh, yeah.
blah, 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 and then add it to your brew. Lalaman was basically saying there's no difference.
Yep.
And it was shocking to me that a producer of not only yeast, but also all the
Nutrient,
additives,
energizer,
for yeast,
all that stuff.
was admitting that all that fluff was inconsequential.
Yep.
And so I was super excited because that made me believe that company more and trust that company more.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it also equated to our experience as brewers. If you watched our really old videos, we had a specialized cup that we used to prehydrate the yeast and do all this stuff.
What did I call it?
The self-agitating,
Self-stirring cup.
self-stirring cup, because it had ridges, so it
Yeah, it was like from a ninja.
It was
or
from
something.
it was a
From a food processor,
Anyway.
a blender.
Anyway, so I was super excited about this article, and then the topic came up again, and I thought, oh, it's an article. They posted it. It's in my emails of 1,000 bajillion, which I never go through properly.
No, she
So
really
I
doesn't.
can
If you ever
find-
send her an email,
I can
she'll
find
see it in like
again,
3
right?
months.
No, I did not find it again. I even searched on their thing to try to find it again, and I couldn't find it again, and it really made me terribly sad. So
This is the
Lalaman,
first time hearing of this.
if you're listening,
Please sponsor us.
please sponsor
Did I
us.
say that out loud?
Yeah, no, I would totally be so stoked to be sponsored by them. But
We should talk to them. Maybe they will.
contact me or contact us or whatever and repost.
Email me
that.
because I actually read my emails.
I've been better
Yes, you looked once in the last month.
No, I look every day now.
Oh, do you?
Yes.
Oh, I'm impressed.
Mostly to make sure my dad didn't send me a new order for Amazon.
Yeah.
Anyway, it
The
was
business emails mostly come to me.
It was a great article. It was very informative and very refreshing to see somebody be that open to a non-commercial outlook on how their product works. And so that sound, man, I really love that sound. So that was awesome. But
it also, you know, the interesting thing is that undermines a little bit of their own sales, which is a very interesting concept for a corporation to do. They published something that directly goes against one of the products that they sell.
And that's why I'm even more appreciative of it, because
now I really want to see this. I think I glanced at it.
Other companies that I don't want to name out because that's not cool really stress the prehydration and the staggered nutrient at that stage.
I don't have a problem
even incorporating it into a brew.
I don't have a problem with them saying you should hydrate it first. I really don't have a problem with that.
No.
If you like hydrating your yeast, please go ahead and do so. It proves that it's going to work. Okay.
And that is helpful information.
I have an issue with companies that force you or make you think you have to, you know, that whole FOMO, fear of missing out.
You have to purchase
more stuff to make this work, or it's not going to work. That's where we have a little bit of a difference of opinion than other brewers, maybe, because we don't fall for that. We do things that work.
And it's actually stronger, much stronger than a difference of opinion. It's actually how this channel started, is that we were so tired of people saying, you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to follow this, you have to buy these things, when we were just brewing stuff in our kitchen without any of that stuff, and it was delicious.
I was making everything with bread yeast. I didn't use yeast nutrient. I didn't add anything.
It was delicious.
And stuff came out great.
And so, yeah, we didn't know what we were doing, but we knew what was in our glass was delicious.
If I wrote down half of what I did, that was a good recipe. I don't think I ever made the same thing twice for a long time. But we enjoyed it, and it was good. Do I believe that what we make now is a little better?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
absolutely.
I think so. I think our tastes have changed. We've grown as brewers. We've learned a lot. And as we see that something is in fact a better way to go and isn't harmful in some way, we do it.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
It's that simple. So that's why, a lot of people have a misconception that we go against the rules. Well, we do, only insofar as things that aren't necessary or, in our case, important.
Right. And we've always been this kind of personality, and regardless of what field we're in, there's a toolbox. Okay? Mm-hmm. And whatever you do, you have a toolbox, metaphorically toolbox. And all of those tools are available to you in that box. Does that mean you have to use all those tools in every situation? No. And why would you? That's ridiculous. If you're doing electrical stuff, do you really need...
Here we go. She's going to try to come up with tools and stuff now for electrical workers. This ought to be good. Come on, babe. You started it.
Plumber's tape. Do you need plumber's tape when you're doing electrical stuff?
Maybe,
but more than likely...
You need electrical tape.
Probably not. You probably need the electrical tape, if you need tape at all, right? And now all the
right tool for the right job.
Yeah,
but they know what you're talking about. Okay. One of my best skill sets that I can always lay claim to fame is I can take a fairly complex concept and simplify it down. Because a lot of the time, things that we think are very, very complex are actually just bloated. There's really no reason for it to be as complex as it is. It's just the way people have perceived it, or it's been made that way for whatever reason, whether to keep people out, to make it more complex, someone thought it was necessary. There's all these reasons. And we see this in brewing too. I'm actually referring to my career as a photographer. People made things so complicated. I'll be totally honest with you. You can learn how to use a camera in about 15 minutes. I can teach you how to shoot pictures in 15 minutes. And I don't mean like your cell phone. I mean an actual manual camera. I can teach you in 15 minutes. You'll spend a lifetime mastering how to do it.
Absolutely.
But I can teach you how to do it in 15 minutes. Brewing is much the same way.
And that comes back to my toolbox, is that there's a time and place for all of those tools.
Absolutely.
All of them. Okay? So some people have criticized us and said, oh, we're scared of insert product here.
Scared is the wrong word.
That is not true. The fact is that we choose on purpose, with an education behind that choosing, to use something else or to omit that because it's not necessary in this particular application. Now, if you've noticed, we've started to add nutrients such as Fermate O because we are comfortable with using Fermate O. And even though we add it to some brews that we feel, me on my side, feel aren't necessarily necessary. I know I use that word twice.
It's insurance.
It's insurance. It's just if something goes awry, this may help it along.
Something I'd like to add to the nutrient thing. Fermate O is one of those great nutrients in that too much doesn't really have a negative side effect unless you go like stupid high amounts. But if you use the right amount, it works. If you use too much, it probably isn't going to negatively affect your brew. That is key, and that is why we have accepted Fermate O as something we use.
There is plenty of documentation, like a large amount of documentation on other yeast nutrients that say too much is too much. And not only is it going to affect your flavor, it can actually affect the process of fermentation itself.
Yeah.
So please do the research. If you're not a research junkie like I am, I'm sorry, then don't do the research. Just listen to us. It's all good. But
we have gone off the rails that were the rails connected to the rails.
We're still talking about yeast, though, and fermentation, and that's what's important about this particular. Yeah, but it's still yeast adjacent.
Okay.
Do you want to come to the conclusion? Do you want to come to the final
There
topic?
really is no conclusion here. I mean, our culmination of this final talk really isn't.
This is our final topic, right?
I know, but it's not necessarily the most important or stupendous thing. But we're going to talk about it anyway.
Yeah.
And that is the controversy over should you take a reading before or after you add the yeast.
All right.
I'm pretty sure families have split up over this one.
It's like North versus South.
Based on the way some people react to this, it's kind of crazy. Now, I can only imagine, and we've talked about this in a couple of our videos, but this is what the UnPasteurized is all about, is putting everything together. I have a feeling that people came up with this idea that you should not take a gravity reading before adding yeast, or you should only take it before adding yeast. Let me correct that. Because they made up a brew, let it sit for like 2 days, and then took a reading. Okay. Why you would do that? I don't know. If you forgot, how do you forget to take a reading? I don't know.
We forget a lot of things, but readings is not one of them.
But if you make up a brew and you put yeast in and you let it sit for 2 days and then you take a gravity reading, well, obviously it's probably not going to be that accurate. But if you made up a brew, take a reading, add yeast, take another reading immediately following, I don't think they're going to be any different.
You know what? I actually want to do that.
Seriously?
Seriously. Just to,
you're going to make me do this?
Just to put it to rest, because it's just so obnoxious how many people like.
Fine.
Okay.
We will do it.
We're going to do it.
Just to make you happy.
All right.
We will do it.
So now you have to watch all our videos to find out which one we actually do this in.
Coming to you soon. As always, guys, thank you so much for watching and have a great day.
Bye-bye.